and rain, snowing and blowing up bushels of fun. Now the jingle hop has begun.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford. He is the one and only Wes Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And, Wes, I want to start today's show following up on Matt LaFleur's Monday press conference, as usual, day after the game, review of the proceedings. And it was really kind of funny because he had notched his 10th win, becoming the first Packers head coach in the 101-year history of the Green Bay Packers to reach double-digit wins in his first season in Green Bay. But big surprise, he didn't do anything to celebrate it whatsoever. He was a little frustrated with the way some of the things had gone on offense in the game, and so afterward he went straight up to his desk on the third floor in the atrium and put on the game film and started grinding away to try to figure out how to get this thing where he wants it to be. The whole 10 wins and all that, you know, it's like, okay, he'll relish it however it shakes out in the offseason. But this guy is absolutely laser focused on getting the Packers to a level that he hasn't seen yet.
Yeah, and I think that's what, when you break it all down and you see a team that's 10-3 but still has areas to improve, that's the motivation right now for him and this Packers offense. It's very interesting because right now, as it stands, the Packers are 10-3, and we're going to talk about playoff scenarios. That's going to be a topic moving forward here until Week 17.
Sure.
But unlike many other years, you know, Mike McCarthy always used to like to say, you get to 10 wins, you can start thinking playoffs. This is a different type of year because of just how top-heavy and, you know, the NFC has been and how basically 6 teams have really separated themselves now, with the Rams getting that win from the rest of the pack. And then you have whatever is happening right now in the NFC East.
Right.
I mean, just it's like the Heron Hall of the NFL right now. That you won't understand that reference, but it's like, does anyone want to win this thing?
Like I said, it's a race to 7 wins. At least that's kind of what it looks like right now.
Yeah, and for a second there, that first half on Monday night, I was like, oh, well, maybe Eli Manning wants to come back and win this thing. Who knows? But that being said, the Packers have to stay concentrated because there is scenarios here, Mike, where the Packers could win 11 games and miss the playoffs, depending on how certain things, you know, come together. Now, there are 2 linchpin games to this whole thing. It's the Packers and Vikings next week, and it's the 49ers and Rams, which I believe is also Week 16.
Yes.
A lot of implications based off of both of those.
Yes.
But for either one of those to have huge implications for Week 16, you have to get through the Packers and the Bears and the Rams and the Cowboys. The Packers and Bears, I mean, that matchup right there, the Packers win that game and the Rams lose, the Packers do technically have a playoff spot clinched, if I have that math correct.
Yes, that is correct. This week, a Packers win and a Rams loss guarantees the Packers a playoff spot of one sort or another.
But here's the spoiler alert.
Yeah.
If that scenario plays out, I guarantee you next Monday, Matt LaFleur is not going to want to talk about that. He's going to want to talk about getting the 12th win and winning the division.
Right.
That's the way he's driven, and then that's the way the scenario's played out. The Packers have worked so hard. I mean, you can talk about the ups and the downs of this season, but they've put themselves in a position, Mike, on December 10th to have 10 victories. A team that had been playing and clawing from behind for the better part of 3 years, well, now suddenly they're the ones going around that final turn of the track with the wind in their back and trying to finish this race strong. But you know there's other teams that are going to try to have a good kick too and are going to try to usurp them there on that final, 100 meters or what have you.
Yeah.
That's why the motivation, that's why the attention to detail has to be there, because as we've talked about now a little bit, and we'll preview it more tomorrow, the Chicago Bears are for real. I mean, they are still a good football team that has a not so great record.
They're making a charge.
But they're making a charge, and the Packers have to hold them off on Sunday. And there's one way to do that, and that's to be focused on win number 11.
Yeah, it is to be focused on win number 11. And just to give everyone the quick rundown as to where things stand right now, as we just mentioned, the Packers can clinch a playoff spot this week if they win and if the Rams lose. That would guarantee the Packers a spot in the postseason. As far as the NFC North is concerned, right now the magic number is 12. If the Packers get to 12 wins, they win the NFC North, which means they need to win 2 of their last 3 games to win the division, and it doesn't matter which 2. They can beat the Bears and the Lions and lose to the Vikings and they're division champs, or they can win one of the other ones and beat the Vikings and they're division champs. 12 wins is the magic number there. And obviously the Packers are still keeping their eye on what's going on with the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Saints in terms of 2 of the division champions in the NFC are going to get first-round buys, and so all of that is still in play as well.
And to point this out as well, I mean, it's not quite run the table. Maybe it's run the coffee table or run the nightstand, but I mean, the Packers could very well win these last 3, and then you get a first-round bye.
Yes,
they are
in control of that. If the Packers get to 13 wins, they will have a first-round bye, either the 1 or the 2 seed, depending on what else happens. But obviously, getting to 13 wins is a huge task when your last 3 opponents are all of your division opponents, and 2 of those after this week are going to be on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I really did enjoy, though, beyond what Matt LaFleur said just about that reaching that milestone, was how he broke down this game. And I think one of the things that he's been really good with the media with this year that he probably doesn't get enough credit for, those Monday breakdowns. A lot of times after the games, he says, we have to look at it, we have to review it. But once he reviews it, he's been pretty transparent in what he sees. And he did it again on Monday. We're looking at some of the plays that they were just an eyelash here or 2 away from breaking a big one. And it's one of the reasons why he still thinks this offense, he likes where it's at. He thinks the potential is there for them to be really good down the stretch. They just have to clean some stuff up. In this game, it was kind of pretty much amounted to the pass.
Yeah, it did amount to the passing game. You can't argue with 174 rushing yards, which is a season high for the Packers in 2019, 134 of those from Aaron Jones. But Matt LaFleur, and this is what I thought was kind of interesting, is he started that press conference on Monday. He rattled off like 5 or 6 plays showing how top of mind they were. They're still on his mind as to how close the Packers were in the passing game to breaking this open. He mentioned the play-action throwback to Jimmy Graham a few times. There was a post play over the middle where Allen Lazard was open and Packers didn't connect. There was a potential touchdown pass to Jay Sternberger, the rookie tight end, didn't quite connect there. There was a screen pass to Jamal Williams where one block was missed, and that could have broken for a big one. There was a third down pass to Aaron Jones down the sideline that didn't quite connect. Jones actually released to the inside, which was unexpected, but it's because the cornerback slipped. And Rodgers, because he was lofting a deep ball, he still threw it as though it was an outside release, and so then Jones couldn't catch up with it. So just all these things with the little circumstances, something's off here or there, the timing is a little bit off, so things weren't connecting. This was the message I got from him, though. Matt LaFleur wasn't standing at the podium saying, okay, we're really close, everything's going to be all right. He's like, no, he's saying, we're really close, and we have to get there. That was his message. He is going to be pushing these guys, and he talked about the details of the plays, and that comes down to things like the releases and the timing and a block here or there. The details of the plays, he's going to be pushing these guys to really lock down on those details, because for the Packers to get to where they want to go the rest of this season and hopefully into January, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the execution of all of the finer points so that you're not standing there on a Monday and saying like, oh yeah, we were just 3 or 4 plays away that we needed to connect. That's obviously that's not going to cut it in January.
Well, I think the big line, I think it was Lindy Infante who once said, we were 5 plays away from being 12-4 when they were 7-9 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, right? I mean, those are the kind of things, but it's also hindsight. And if you flip a coin however many times, it's going to vary depending on what's going to happen in that given scenario. I mean, it's just, you can't have all the stars align every time. You have to make sure that you correct what's correctable and then live with the mistakes, because it's a human game. There are mistakes. There's just the fundamental issues that I think the Packers want to hone up here. And you saw it, and it's not just with the offense, it's all three phases. I thought the special teams, as we talked about yesterday, took a big step forward, and LaFleur was very effusive in his praise for their blocking on their punt returns and how they cleaned some stuff up there. Tyler Ervin staying north and south and catching a clean ball. The defense and being able to can dictate the tempo a little bit. Yeah, there were a couple breaks there in the middle of the field that they want to be able to eliminate, but for the most part, the Packers won this game 20-15 because of how the defense responded. Offensively, the step forward that we saw was with the run game, the reemergence of Aaron Jones, and seeing exactly how dynamic he can be. Because the one thing we hadn't really seen, Mike, to this point was him break that big gain. His largest carry before Sunday was 28 yards. He broke the 42-yarder.
42-yarder.
And a credit on that, a 3 tight end package. It was the receiver Jake Kumaro that was busting him free there on the left side of the line.
Yeah, got the big block on the safety.
Yeah, so there are positives that you draw from and things that it's like, okay, that's something you can hang your hat on. This is what we could be down the line. But you also need to have the passing element honed up, and you've seen it. You've seen Devontae Adams. You've seen Alan Lazard. You've seen these receivers have big games. Can you do it more consistently now? Because these next two games, Mike, as I said, New York and Washington, those were the two where it's like, okay, you get the wins, you feel good about yourself. Chicago and Minnesota are two of the tougher defenses the Packers are going to play all season.
Yeah.
And especially if Akeem Hicks comes back this week, which is what all signs are pointing towards, the front is going to be shored up. Yes, they don't have Roquan Smith, but they have a good scheme, and Chuck Pagano has been really intelligent with how he's used that personnel. And then Minnesota, you always know what you're getting with Mike Zimmer. So this is where they got to rise up, because if you take care of business against Chicago and Minnesota, then people expect you to be able to go in Detroit and win that one in the season finale, especially if Matthew Stafford doesn't come back. Can you rise to that occasion? This is what this week is about. This is the first part of that test.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about it more tomorrow with regards to the Bears, but I made this comment in Monday's Insider Inbox writing late Sunday night after the rest of our post-game coverage was up on the website. The Chicago Bears are playing for their season. There's no two ways about it. They are going to come into Lambeau Field and absolutely lay it all on the line, because this is it. And as we talked about yesterday, the Bears could run it here and get to 10-6, and it still might not be enough to get into the postseason.
Right.
But they know they cannot afford a seventh loss. If the Packers beat the Bears on Sunday, I don't know if the Bears are necessarily fully mathematically eliminated. That might depend on some other things. But they are eliminated with regard to the Packers. The Packers will essentially have eliminated them. That Chicago cannot catch Green Bay in any way, shape, or form. And this is a Bears team that, yes, there were some low moments. They've underachieved to a certain extent, but they were 12-4. They were 12-4 last year for a reason. They were a field goal away from getting to the divisional round of the playoffs, and they're starting to play like that 2018 Chicago Bears team again.
A couple things here. One, you're right. They'll still, even if they lose to the Packers on Sunday, they still could have that potential playoff door open, but they need Minnesota to lose out. They need the Rams to lose out, and certainly that would include them beating the Vikings in their regular season finale. But the part that you raise, I think, is a good point, because it's something I talked with Mercedes Lewis about last week. This is a guy that's been around now for 13, 14 years in the NFL. And he mentions how the parity of the league in the margin for error is so small with how much parity that there is. And there really isn't that much that separates a team like the Bears from being a legitimate playoff contender. Look at it, Mike. They beat the team that could very well end up winning the NFC East still in Dallas last week, and it was a convincing victory.
Yeah.
But you play by the rules, and the rules is the divisions get a win. Whoever wins the division gets a bye, or gets a seeding and gets a home game.
Yeah.
And two of them get byes. But for the Packers here, I think the important thing is going to be at 10-3 to show that this is what we present, this is what we offer, and this is who we are. We've been more consistent than the Bears have been this season, and it's put us in a position now to potentially control our own destiny going into the playoffs. But to your original point, the Bears are dangerous because there is nothing to lose at this case. And unlike
There's
New York,
nothing to lose, but yet everything to lose at the same time.
and that's right, because unlike New York and Washington, who at least, depending on what they do with their coaching staffs, that personnel is built beyond this year. They're not looking at this year. The Bears were looking at this year. They were staring this season in the eye, and they wanted to be able to make a run, and they wanted to show that they could be a team that goes from the division champion to a conference champion to a Super Bowl contender. They weren't able to do that to this point. So, you have a GM, you have a head coach, you have personnel there that they were very forward-thinking with, that they put a lot of eggs in this basket that's right in front of us. And that's what makes the Bears dangerous, and it makes it so that LaFleur and his coaching staff, and once these players come back into the building on Wednesday, they have to be up on it, because in order for this to be relevant, in order for the Packers to consider themselves to be legitimate playoff contenders, they needed to get through these 3 weeks. They've gotten through 2 of them. You need to beat the Bears, and then you need to be able to do what they haven't been able to do, which is win in U.S. Bank Stadium.
Which is to win in Minneapolis, and that'll be certainly coming up soon enough. Well, with regard to the Bears, we know that they're coming off of a mini bye, having played on the previous 2 Thursdays, as a matter of fact. But I also want to get to some of the other results from this past Sunday in the NFL, because, boy, that game in New Orleans, Wes, San Francisco 49ers against the Saints, back and forth. It was like watching the score on like a pinball machine or something. The way the numbers just kept rising, and it comes down to the Saints coming back from 9 points down in the fourth quarter. They take the lead. The 49ers get the ball last, and a big fourth down conversion to George Kittle, coupled with a face mask penalty that takes what would have been a fairly lengthy field goal into more of chip shot range for Robbie Gould. And the San Francisco 49ers reclaim the number 1 spot in the NFC with a 48-46 shootout victory. San Francisco 11-2, New Orleans is 10-3.
How freaking good is Drew Brees, though? 40 years old, to put 349 passing yards. I believe that was a season high against Robert Saleh's pass defense.
Yeah, against that. I mean, those are 2 teams that have played some pretty good defense for the bulk of the season, and it's just an example of how you absolutely never know in this league how games are going to. I mean, who would have thought? Yes, I mean, the 49ers have a really good offense. Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback. The Saints have been really good on offense for a number of years. But nobody thought with those 2 defenses going head-to-head in December that there'd be 94 points on the board in regulation, mind you. It didn't even go to overtime.
Well, there's a certain four-eyed beat writer sitting to your left right now that decided not to start Drew Brees in his fantasy league. Went with Russell Wilson instead, and that turned out great.
How did that go?
I'll be looking forward to playing in the consolation bracket this week in the Green Bay Ballers League.
But have fun with that.
But no, turning the focus back, a couple things we learned here. One, Kyle Shanahan can coach, man, because it's not even about the schemes. It's about the fact that the Saints came back and they put those points on the board. There's 50-some seconds left, 40-some seconds left. And for Shanahan to rally the troops and for Jimmy Garoppolo to manage that situation, this was another one of those games like we saw last month where the running game did get going, but it didn't dictate the tempo like it has in the past for the 49ers.
Yeah.
Jimmy Garoppolo needed to win that game, and George Kittle, who did diddly squat in the first half, I believe even he had a fumble at one point, he comes back and is their big playmaker down the stretch. That's what you anticipate from those players. And credit to the 49ers to be able to come back and pull that out, because the storyline until week 17 now, unless the 49ers actually claim this number 1 seed, is the fact that they ended up losing to Seattle in a game in which they could have tied and really controlled their destiny down the stretch.
Yeah.
They needed this win. They needed to claw their way back, because there's going to be a really good team from the NFC West that's going to be a 5 seed. And that's just the reality, and the 49ers want to make sure it's not them.
Yeah, well, I give the 49ers a heck of a lot of credit, because everybody talked about, this gauntlet that they were facing, where they were going to have to face Green Bay, and then the Baltimore Ravens, and then the New Orleans Saints back to back to back. And what did they do? They ended up winning 2 out of those 3, and the one that they lost was essentially on a walk-off field goal, the same way that they beat the Saints in New Orleans. And I'm telling you, Wes, I realize I'm biased in this sense, because in my years covering the Packers, I've only been to the New Orleans Superdome twice, and the Packers pretty much got it handed to them both times, and I left both of those games with an absolute ear-splitting headache from all of the noise. I think that Superdome is one of the toughest places in the NFL to play. I certainly would not like the Packers to have to go there in January if it comes down to that.
Bring your Advil.
Exactly. I'm going to bring a whole bottle. But for the 49ers to go in there in December in that big of a matchup and to perform the way they did and to pull out a victory, I mean, I know if you and I were sitting here, Packers fans, if the Packers were involved in a game like that, Packers fans would be going crazy saying the defense isn't ready for the playoffs, and all this kind of stuff. Nobody's saying that with New Orleans and San Francisco because their defenses have done a really good job throughout the bulk of the season, and this was just one of those games that just took on a certain path, and that's how this league can go sometimes. Exactly,
and so much it is based on who you're playing, too. I mean, with all due respect to Washington, there's a reason why the Packers defense, 262 yards compared to, some of these other weeks where they've had 400. I mean, you expect to give up yards when you face the New Orleans Saints, especially in their own place. That's just the way that the business goes. The thing that is surprising to me, that's going to be one of the interesting storylines to follow, getting back to the Superdome, the Saints have been beatable at home this year.
They have been.
That is something that has not really been a thing in the past with them.
I totally agree with you.
So seeing how they perform here into January is going to be really intriguing to watch. They're going to get one home game for sure, and we'll see what happens with, obviously, that number 2 seed.
Yeah.
But right now, as it stands, I think it's been 3 times they've been beaten at home now. Atlanta, right? And now San Francisco. And then when there was one more, was there not?
I thought they got, I can't remember for sure.
You keep talking and sounding smart, and I'm going to look.
Well, that's okay. The other one that is.
Oh, there was only 2. I'm sorry.
There's only 2.
They lost at the Rams.
Yeah. Well, and obviously they ended up,
host.
granted it was the bad call and everything, but they did lose the NFC Championship at home last year to the Los Angeles Rams. The other one, though, that is worth talking about, too, is the Rams because they hosted Sunday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks, and as much as we've been talking about the Bears and how they're starting to look a lot more like the 2018 Bears, the Rams are starting to look a lot more like the 2018 Rams that won the NFC and went to the Super Bowl. They are still on the fringe here trying to stay in the race, but they handled a contender in pretty impressive fashion, knocking Seattle down a peg, and the Rams are still right in the mix here.
People want to talk about with the Packers and some of the areas that they're struggling with. Seattle is a real legitimate contender in the NFC, and they are not averse to having just completely laying an egg game. They've done it several times this season. They can play with anybody, but there's also moments where it just seems like that offense can't even get going.
Yeah, and they've had games where their defense has let them down as well. They had a home game earlier this year, Wes, where they had to go to overtime to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right.
Now Bruce Arians is doing some good things in Tampa and trying to turn things around there. But that game ended up, something like, 40 whatever to 30 whatever in overtime, and that's not the type of defense you would expect to see Seattle playing at home. So they have their flaws and their vulnerabilities as well, and they've had their struggles in certain games this year, and they're sitting there at 10-3 in the same position as the Packers.
And now you have the Rams who are trying to play catch up on everyone. I mean, that's why if the Packers can take care of business this week against the Bears, and again, that's a big if, you can't look ahead, but there's so many implications with that potential Vikings game because it's not just about, where the Packers are. The Vikings need to stay in this thing for the wild card too, based on, the Rams still being in the hunt.
Absolutely.
The one thing, and Sean McVay discussed it recently, they're getting back to Todd Gurley. Now, this wasn't the game that's going to go on Todd Gurley's highlight reel.
Sure.
But I think LA's starting to realize after getting away from it late last season that Gurley is one of your top playmakers. Unless there's a legitimate thought that, okay, something's wrong with his knee and you just got to be careful, you got to feed him. And even if it is a game like this where he only averages 3.5 yards a carry, that's the identity though, right? Isn't that the reason why the Rams originally became the contenders that they were? Because they got Gurley going and they were able to kind of pull him out of those doldrums that sort of were during that last Jeff Fisher season. This game, what did he have? 27 touches? I mean, the more he touches the ball, the more this offense is in sync. And I think you're seeing that is really getting back to Jared Goff. I think he's a really talented quarterback. I don't know if he's at the juncture in his career where he can just put the ball in his hands and let him run the show.
Well,
he needs a complementary run game.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot with the Rams offense right now, much like we're seeing with the Packers offense in a lot of stages, where when you can get some things going on the ground and then you are working play action off of that,
right.
you work play action and suddenly guys are running free in the secondary and your quarterback's got these big throwing lanes and bang, you're hitting plays. If you're not getting the running game going and you're just trying to play a straight drop back game or just line up in the shotgun all the time and have the quarterback survey the field, defenses are coming up with a lot more answers for that when they don't have to honor the play action and things aren't working off of that. So the Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur offenses, I think, are very similar in that respect. And what I saw on Sunday, getting back to the Packers, is it just felt like every time – and obviously they had the running game going with Aaron Jones, and it felt like every time Aaron Rodgers ran a play action, there was somebody open. Now, they didn't connect on all of them because, as we talked about at the beginning, there were some plays that just missed and everything. But other than one time, I remember Washington on one side of the field, they completely stayed home on the play action, and it wasn't there, and Rodgers had to throw it away or something like that or take a check down. Other than that one play, it seemed like every time Rodgers ran play action, there was somebody open. The play design was exactly what you were looking for, and that's something I think that the Packers can really make the foundation of things moving forward.
They weren't able to carry it through for the last 3 quarters, but that first quarter, what they were able to do, getting Rodgers open in space with some rollouts, rolling both sides of the field, and that people always want to talk about identities, and I kind of laugh at that. I mentioned in Inbox, winning is an identity, but that is something I think when you look at this team down the stretch that it can really do well. When Rodgers is outside the pocket with the way that those guys can block and the threat that those running backs present now as pass catchers, in addition to what they do as running backs, that's going to be interesting to watch. I think that is definitely a foundational point of this offense that they can build on.
Yeah, I think that's where that's if there is something this offense is going to hang its hat on moving forward, I think that's where it has to be. So, but for now, we do need to sign off on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. Subscribe to us, like us on iTunes and other podcast services, and be sure to check out the Packers YouTube channel. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next time.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel, Mr. Grinch. You're a bad banana with a greasy black peel.